Okay, so now we're back to we're going to look at 6, 7, 8, and 9. The some of the inventory management techniques. As I mentioned to you before, these are probably a little more commonly used than some of the others, as you'll see. A little more applicable in today's world. I think it is important to say one thing though, and that is inventory is not bad. Okay, inventory is not a bad thing. Inventory, there's two components to inventory. The one component is that satisfies demand. There is a level of demand that has to be satisfied, and inventory does do that. So it satisfies that demand because it can't be satisfied within the service level time other than to have it wherever you have it and in the quantity in which you have it. So that's good. The bad part of inventory, the quote unquote bad part of inventory, is the amount of inventory you have to cover variation. So the more that you can narrow down the variation and understand the variability, then the less safety stock you have, the higher the service level that you will get out of the more efficiency you'll get out of the inventory you have, and you won't disrupt or cause stockouts in your demand. So the challenge is to manage the tail. The challenge is to understand, why do we have this variability? Is it real? Is it caused by suppliers? Is it caused by something that we're doing? Is it caused by some unexpected activity? And it's not to say that any of that is bad. It's to understand what's causing the variability, which is causing the Z factor, the variability factor to increase to a point where you have to carry more safety stock in order to meet your demand. So that's where you want to focus your attention. You certainly have to understand the demand. You want to know how it got there, who it's from, so forth and so on, and is it stable. But then focus your attention on with your colleagues on improving variability. And there's a cost to all this, and you can model all this cost. So this is what supply chain does. So if you wanted to do that, you would do that in a network optimization or network simulation program, where you would model the impact of changing supplier lead times. For example, let's say you wanted to look at, should I pull my supplier base back to Mexico, or should I pull it back to North America from Asia? Well, you can look at that. You can say, I've got to finance 16 weeks of in transit and inventory, which is my lead time to get it from Asia all the way over here. From the time I place it to the time I get it, 16 weeks. So if that's it, then you can very easily simulate the impact of saying, now I'm going to get it in North America. My cost might be different, but my inventory carrying costs might offset my cost differences. So, and my transportation costs. So this is exactly what we do in supply chain, and we do this as needed. But this is also part of being actively engaged in a corporate commitment to a single plan, because now you're sharing goals and objectives, and hopefully the incentives get aligned as well. So just keep that in mind. There are two different kinds of inventory here. We're not talking about the good kind. The good kind you have to have, and then it's all about attacking the tails on the bell curve and trying to minimize that. And a lot of that comes from, I don't have visibility over it, so the more visibility you have, the better you're going to be able to manage it. And that's where that's where your technology side comes in. So just try to pull it together and think of it like that. So here we go. Okay, centralized versus decentralized. Well, this is a classic trade-off, isn't it? I mean, if you can satisfy everybody from a single location, you're going to pool your demand. You're only going to have one demand you have to work from, rather than a demand at every location. So that's much easier. You're not dealing with the same level of variation. So the issue is the cost to serve versus the cost of not being able to serve from a single facility. And so here you're trading off transportation costs, you're trading off distance, and you're trading off inventory investment and warehousing costs. So all those costs, because there's no question you could have one warehouse in the United States, and basically if you elected to use an air freight solution of some sort, either express or air freight, You could deliver your product the next day to anybody that is near an airport. You couldn't deliver it to anybody who's not near an airport. So whatever that's defined as. And so they have an air freight capability. So you can look at that and you can say, okay, well, what's the cost of that versus the cost of not being able to do that? And if I put a warehouse somewhere else, where should that warehouse be, or distribution center someplace else? Where should it be in order to give me X% coverage of a specified service level? And that is exactly what that simulation model would do for you. So uh, again, if you're centralized, you have less safety stock because your demand variability isn't there. Your service level will be higher because you'll have more inventory in one area. So that's why your overhead costs are lower in a centralized system, or conversely, they're higher in a decentralized system because you have multiple admin services and multiple locations. Your response time is lower in terms of customer lead time. Your transportation costs you have to look at both your outbound and inbound, not just your outbound. That's very important. We talk about echelon. You have to look at the cost to get it to the inbound plus the cost of the outbound. Your customer lead time, um, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure your response time is lower in a decentralized system. I have to think about that. That could be a typo, but anyway, we'll get over that. Okay, so in a system like that, you're going to have one person that's going to be the decision maker, and they're going to have information to the inventory at all your retailers, at all your warehouses, and it's an echelon type approach to thing. And we're going to look at multi-echelon warehousing here in just a second. But when you look at the echelon, you have to look at inventory in transit, inventory on order. You have to look at inventory that's actually, you even have to look at inventory that's in process. I can tell you I've had to steal inventory from orders because we had an emergency order that we had to fill, and so we would take that order we take that inventory right out of an existing order that had already been allocated. We had to reallocate it. Very ugly to do and time consuming to do, but sometimes you have to look at all of your inventory and know where all your inventory is, upstream and downstream, and what is the status of all that inventory. In some cases, that inventory may be right outside your door sitting in a trailer that you haven't brought into the dock door. So again, this is another example of understanding visibility, understanding where things are at any given time. So this is a warehouse echelon inventory assessment. So you're looking up and down, and what's in the warehouse is what's on the way to the warehouse, what's on the way to your retailer, what is in, and then what's actually in your warehouse at any given status that you have. If it's in transit, whether it's in transit here, you can reconsign this product if you have to. You can stop it en route and reroute it if need be. You can rebalance inventory amongst retailers. You can rebalance inventory amongst retailer stores. Depending upon the type of inventory program you have, some of the retailers will allow you to do that. Done that one too. Service level, this is where you're saying I'm going to have a 98%, a 95%, a 92%, whatever your service level is on a specific type or category of product. And this is a very, very critical decision, because remember, in the demand plan, are we going to take orders for 100 or are we going to sell 100? So if we're saying our plan is 85%, then we're going to take orders for 100 and we're going to sell 85. So we're going to have 15 on back order, which rolls into the next planning period as a result of that. So the two are not inseparable. They are conjoined. And so the final plan has to take into account what the service level optimization level is that's agreed to by the company, which is an overall function of what's the cost of financing it, how much inventory is required, do we have capacity to make it, and on and on and on. Do we have transportation capacity to carry it even if we could make it? So all these things are what is decided at that sales and operations planning meeting. And what is the appropriate level of service? This is something that, again, most likely is going to come down from your salespeople. It could also come from your customer service people who, and many times talk to the customer more often than the sales guys do, and they certainly talk to them in a different way than sales does. So it's not necessarily all retail. I mean, it's definitely across all different kinds of companies and channels. And so you have to choose the appropriate level of service, but you have to have tools that allow you flexibility in how you set these kinds of levels. Again, this is not something that you can't get off the shelf. You can. So this is Z. This is a Z factor right here. So this is demand times the percentage, and you can see very quickly if you want to have a 99%, you're going to carry 3 times the inventory. That's what that's basically saying. So this is the statistical calculation of Z, and it's basically it's a statistical calculation of variability just using statistics 101. So it's nothing more than that. This just confirms what that previous chart just said, that the higher the inventory, the more units you have to have. So here's your demand, or here's your lead time. And then here's your lead time if you have to have a higher service level. So you have to have that many more units. So again, you want to set service levels based on criteria that you establish. That's corporately established. You can set service levels based on profit, on volume, on low variability because you can manage it better, on short lead time. You can set all of your service strategies based on that kind of thing. That's one way to do it. There's also another way to do it, which we're going to talk about now. But if you obviously the higher you have it, the more you're going to, again, these are very, I guess, specific criteria is the way to say it. We'll leave it at that. Okay. If you say 95% against all products, you can weight that. So you can say I want 99%. I want a weighted average 95. You could have 99% on your high profit margins, and you can have an 80% on your low profit margins, and you can ultimately get to a 95% level. So again, you can weight it. It's not you have to have 95% flat across every item. That makes no sense. You want to, again, focus, as we talked about before. You put your resource into the items that matter. That's what we're trying to say. Look at the items that matter. And that brings you right to this, which is the ABC or the Pareto classification. I would trust that all of you are familiar with Pareto. This is Mr. Pareto right here. He actually did. He's an Italian gentleman. He actually did exist, and came up with this method of classification and stratification, for that matter. The point about this is that many people just will use maybe one characteristic or attribute to say an A item is based on volume. It's our highest volume moving items. Well, that makes it an A item in the factory. It may not make it an A item in terms of profit contribution. So you have to work this up and down the company to determine what items are A's, what items are B's, C's, D's, X's, whatever you use. And there's no limit to ABC. You can have as many. It's just a flag. It's just a flag that you set in your enterprise system, or it's just a way for you to categorize or classify groups of products. And you can do this. For example, new items, I always classify it as an X. So when we went into S&OP, the X items were new items, and we treated them even higher than an A because they were a new item. So we were bird dogging those things every day and making sure that we were selling at the rate that the sell-through was there, that the orders were coming in, that we were filling the orders, and we had enough inventory in the right place at the right time in order to do that. And we had a multi-echelon, multi-location network around the country. And so we were constantly balancing and rebalancing inventory in order to in order to make sure that we met those objectives. And we measured all that. So we said that our A was going to be 95%, our B, I believe, was 85%, and our C was 70. So on a weighted average basis, you're generally looking at 80% of your products. If you just start with this, 80% of your products are the top 80% of your revenue is going to be in 20% of the products, and that's your A. So that's the overview. 15% of your B's, 5% of your C's or below. So I mean, if you go from there and then you break it out below that, you start to get the sense for what's going on. But it's not just one attribute. I mean, it can be any combination of these, or it can be one. Like I said, I prefer to manage new products separately. That's up to you. I like a different classification for our flag. And then once they cease to be new, then they become either an A, B, C, or D, or whatever they are. So this is constant and continuous review, and items will become A, B, or C depending upon whatever criteria you select, and they change. They may change every day, every week, every month, every 6 months, whatever it is. But when you're running a forecast, you're looking to change your classifications and making sure that you have a service level that corresponds to this classification. So that's how it works. And this is a very powerful tool. It's a very simple tool. It's been around for a long time, but a lot of people still don't really particularly understand that one, can't have more than 3 classifications, or 2, that you can use different attributes other than just numbers of pieces or volume to determine what an A item is. So you may be surprised what it is when you really burrow down and get into the details of what's going on. So again, this is the ABC classification, and we're talking about different forecasting strategies for A's. You want to have your tightest forecast, error tolerances on your A items or your X items, whatever your high important items are. You want to make sure that you manage these extremely tightly, that you clearly don't go out and just overburden the system with inventory on A items, because you shouldn't have to do that if they're being planned correctly. So practically, what you want to do is you want to do, if you're into this, you want to do periodic inventory review. You want to have detailed data at the level you need for usage, lead times, and safety stock. You want to reduce your safety stock levels, which is the variability. You want to try to understand that and take it out as much as possible. You want to cycle count, make sure your inventories are accurate and up to date, and particularly if you're in a multi-echelon situation, you want to make sure you're frequently taking inventories. We'll talk about WMS systems when we get to distribution centers, but WMS systems normally, if there's any exception to any directed put away or pick, there's a cycle count either on the spot or no later than the next morning, and you have to run your cycle counts before you can start in again. So you have to adjust your inventory. The ABC approach, I strongly recommend this to you, whatever approach that you take. And the concept here of shifting inventory or inventory ownership, again, this is the idea of consignment. When Sherwood had sutures, we had consignment sutures all over the country. Consignment is they were on our books, and the hospital system only paid for what they used. We would go in and count, and the salespeople would go in and count, and then they would get an invoice for whatever they used. But the inventory was not on the system's books. We didn't book it as a sale. It went into a consignment inventory account, and that's one way we did it. Another way to do it is called vendor managed inventory. And in a vendor managed inventory, you're sharing stock levels of your retail locations or of your distributor locations, and then the supplier is replenishing your inventory based upon predetermined inventory management rules, whether it's a Kanban or you want to have what we call negative ownership. In some cases, negative ownership is the distributor gets paid before the distributor pays the supplier. It's called negative ownership. And the idea of not having, so you've taken all of your procurement resource off of these particular suppliers if you trust these suppliers. And this happens all the time. It's been particularly in the big box guys. This happens a lot with major suppliers like Procter and Gamble and Pepsi and Coke and places like that, where they have massive amounts of volume going through there. Those companies accept the responsibility for keeping the shelf stocked and making sure the inventory is on the shelf. Again, at Sherwood, we ran all of our distributors, most of our major distributors. We ran vendor managed inventory for all their locations and every SKU at every location that they had. So in the case of some of the larger distributors at that time, a lot of those guys are gone now. But they might have had 100, 150 different locations around the country, and we would manage all 150, the inventory on the shelves of all 150. We would auto replenish. We get their demand. We would reforecast based on their demand. All this was done with 2 people. So we ran roughly $900 million of business in an automated way with 2 people on vendor managed inventory, and it was a tremendous success for our distributors as well as for the company. So we leverage technology. We leverage collaboration with our hospital partners, with our hospital distribution partners, and we committed back to them priority in making sure that they got the inventory that they needed to stay in stock. Then we did consignment. Combinations of these things is what gives you a competitive advantage in the field. So again, you're here when you're looking at this from a quantitative, you're looking to reduce your inventory levels, and you want to increase your inventory turnover. So again, inventory is not bad, but inventory turnover is the metric that says you're turning it constantly. As I think I mentioned on the sales and order processing, we were able to take the cartridge inventory turnover from less than 1 to up to 8, which was unbelievable, all because we went into a collaborative planning process. So hopefully that's is giving you some good solid things to chew on and think about and different ways of doing things. And it doesn't matter if you're in the hospital world, if you're at Boeing and you know exactly what you're going to make, you know exactly when you're going to get it, or you know exactly when you need it, you still have to manage all this. So if something goes wrong, or if you don't have the parts that you need, then you're into an expediting situation, second to none, and maybe even a substitution second to none. And we could talk about that for a while too, because one of the things that we had to do is we had to come up with substitution protocols for certain kinds of items. So if we didn't have a certain size catheter, that we could substitute a second size with the approval of the institution. So we had all kinds of substitutability rules that went into this as well too. So I think this is it for this. And so 3C is we're going to look at some inventory management rules or pearls of wisdom, if you will. Back in a minute. Oh, this one I like. This one I saw. Sorry, geez. Putting out the blessing without finishing it. Remember, a system, when I talk to my quantitative friends, I tell them if it hasn't seen Christmas twice, they don't know it's Christmas. And so if you don't have 24 months of history, your forecasting software is not going to be able to recognize the trends and the seasonalities that you have. So your ability to transfer the data, 24 months of data, is really and truly essential at the item level, the level that you're managing, is absolutely essential. So you can't assume that the system knows it's holiday until it's been through a holiday, and that's the takeaway of that one. That's it. So we'll be back in a little bit with this last one.